Working capital and working capital percentage is a crucial number to understand within your business, and also how to influence it because of the impact it has on your cash position. Firstly, let's define working capital. Working capital is your debtors, the people who owe you money, plus your stock, plus your work in progress, minus your creditors. That will give you your working capital number. Working capital percentage is looking at your working capital relative to your revenue. So if I have a business that has $1,500 worth of working capital, let's say there's $1,000 worth of stock, $1,000 worth of debtors, and $500 worth of creditors, those numbers combined give me $1,500 worth of working capital. Whenever you're comparing in a financial calculation balance sheet and P&L, you need to annualize the P&L. So because we're looking at revenue, we need to either use an annual figure or an annualized figure. So for example, if I want to look in the month and I've done $1,000 worth of revenue for the month, then I need to use $12,000 as that number. Continuing on that example of $1,500 worth of working capital, and let's say in the course of a year, I have $6,000 worth of revenue, my working capital percentage will be 25%. What does that actually mean? That means for every dollar of revenue I generate, I need to have 25 cents of money to sustain my debtors, my creditors, and my stock. Taking that one step further, that means for every dollar of growth, I have to find 25 cents. Now that we understand how it's calculated, we want to be able to influence that number. So we've spoken about 4 different elements in working capital: debtors, stock, work in progress, and creditors. So let's look at those 4 factors first to improve working capital percentage, because ideally we want to reduce working capital percentage as much as possible. Firstly, debtors. The reality is how can we get paid quicker? We want to reduce that debtors value down. So getting paid as quickly as possible by our debtors. We want to hold the maximum amount of stock to satisfy demand and nothing more. We want to make sure that we're turning our stock over on a consistent basis so that essentially our stock holdings aren't turning into a museum of stock of our product. So reducing stock down as much as possible, or minimizing the stock we have on hand while still satisfying demand and meeting sales. That is the key balancing act in those numbers. Same thing with work in progress. You want to make sure that you're doing as much work as you possibly can and then invoicing that work as quickly as possible to minimize your work in progress. Because if you're doing a lot of work and not invoicing it, that's just only increasing your working capital. Think of it as a progression. You buy a piece of stock, it then goes into work in progress, which is somewhere between a raw material and a finished good. You pick up the work in progress, that then, once that's finalized and invoiced, it then becomes a debtor, and then we get paid. That's a working capital cycle. Then the element with creditors. We don't want to stretch our creditors out, but we also want to make sure that we're balancing how long we pay our creditors versus their terms. And there are some opportunities that you might be better off paying your creditors quicker, because you can actually pay less, because they might offer a prompt payment discount, which generates more gross profit as a result. So you can see there, within those 4 elements, there's already a number of moving pieces to help influence the working capital within there. But in very simple summary, debtors, you want to pay them quicker. With stock and work in progress, you want to minimize those numbers without compromising your ability to sell and satisfy your clients' needs. And with creditors, you want to optimize their utilization. You don't want to stretch them out. You don't want to get a bad reputation with your suppliers, but at the same time, balance the paying of suppliers with getting a better deal, which can enhance your profitability if you're paying less for your supplies. If you lived in a world where you could keep your working capital dollar value the same and increase your revenue, well then your working capital percentage is naturally going to get better. But why am I a little bit skeptical of that? Well, your underlying processes of how quickly you get paid by clients, how well you manage your stock, your work in progress and your creditors is a byproduct of your systems and processes, regardless of if you're selling $100, $1,000 or $1 million. So do I think that if you're going to go from $100,000 in revenue to $200,000 in revenue, you're just going to keep working capital the same? I would argue it's going to go on the same path that it already is. You've really got to influence those elements of working capital to improve your working capital percentage and to get that as low as possible. So a benchmark we often use for working capital percentage is below 15% is excellent. Around 20% is where most businesses are, and 20% and above is where it becomes quite challenging. As at the time of recording, which is February 2022, working capital percentages are incredibly high because of all the inconsistencies with freight, with how easy or how hard it is to get stock in our possession, and people are just crying out to reserve stock as much as possible, which pushes that working capital percentage higher and higher, which impacts your cash position and the cash you have available. In another video, we're going to talk about the dynamic between gross profit percentage and working capital percentage. So there'll be a link in here to send you to that video, which is going to enhance your utilization of working capital percentage and help improve the cash performance of your business.